What if I told you that scoring, like a 125 on an IQ test, could legally get your job application thrown straight into the trash?
I mean, it sounds completely backward, right? We're so conditioned to believe the workplace is this perfectly rational meritocracy where higher scores always equal better outcomes.
Right. You get the degree, you have the skills, you apply, and the hiring manager just looks at the math and says, you're hired.
Yeah, but the reality is just a lot messier.
It really is. So welcome to another deep dive. Today we are on a mission to demystify the hidden psychology behind exactly how companies decide to hire, train, and, well, sometimes fire you.
It's a huge topic.
It is. So to get to the bottom of this, I'm tossing out my usual assumptions and officially playing the student today. I need you to step into the lecture role and just give me a masterclass on the hidden psychology of the workplace.
Consider it done. I gladly accept the role of your lecturer. We are going to look at the battle between objective measurement and human bias, really breaking down the actual science that explains why the corporate landscape functions the way it does.
Perfect. And to do this, we are pulling our insights directly from Section 13.2 of Chapter 13 from Psychology 2E.
Yep, a great text.
It really dives deep into industrial organizational, or IO, psychology.
Yeah.
And we're going to uncover some truly wild things today.
Oh, definitely.
We'll explore that IQ test scenario I mentioned, look at why making direct eye contact in an interview plays out completely differently depending entirely on your gender.
That one is fascinating.
Right. And we'll examine the bizarre legal loophole that actually allows the restaurant Hooters to hire only women.
It is such a fascinating area of psychology because it applies to literally everyone listening to this right now who has ever held a job.
Exactly.
But, before we can get to the hiring and firing, we have to start at the very foundation, like understanding what a company actually thinks a job is.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I always assumed a manager just sits down, thinks about what they need done, and types out a wish list.
Right, like a quick brainstorm.
Yeah, just, I need someone who can use Excel and doesn't mind answering phones.
Well, sure, that happens in smaller businesses, but in mid to large companies, it's a highly formalized blueprint called a job analysis.
Okay.
And IO psychologists generally use two different approaches to build this blueprint. The first is task-oriented.
Task-oriented.
Exactly. This is where they break the job down into very specific tasks and rate every single one based on how frequently it's performed, how difficult it is, and how crucial it is to the overall operation.
So that's the literal daily grind.
Exactly, the day-to-day stuff. The second approach is worker-oriented, which is also known as job specification.
Okay, how's that different?
So instead of looking at the tasks themselves, this looks at the human being required to do them. It identifies the KSAs, that stands for knowledge, skills, and abilities.
KSAs, got it.
And researchers don't just guess at these, right? The U.S. Department of Labor actually maintains this massive, heavily researched database called Wonderlic.
Net, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's essentially the ultimate cheat sheet for IO psychologists. Like if you look up a municipal firefighter on ONET, it doesn't just say, puts out fires.
Right, that would be a bit vague.
It lists specific tasks like search burning buildings to locate fire victims alongside highly specific technology skills required.
Wait, technology skills for a firefighter?
Yeah, like knowing how to use Microsoft Access or specialized fire incident reporting software.
Oh, wow. But wait, how are they getting this information in the first place?
That's the tricky part.
Because if an IO psychologist comes to my office and asks me to describe my own job for this database, aren't I heavily incentivized to exaggerate?
Oh, absolutely.
Like making it sound way harder and more complex than it is so I seem more valuable to the company? I mean, that sounds like asking a teenager to rate how difficult cleaning their room is. You're never going to get an objective answer.
That is a brilliant pushback, student, and your suspicion is completely validated by the data. Yeah, researchers Deardorff and Wilson tested exactly this back in 2003. They found that when you rely on job analyses based on descriptions from the people currently holding those exact jobs,
They skew the results.
exactly, the data is the least reliable.
We just can't help ourselves. We all want to be the hero of our own office story.
We really do. Which is why multiple sources, peers, supervisors, and direct observation have to be used to get a true consensus.
That makes sense.
But the actionable takeaway for you, listening right now, is that ONET is public.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You can go there, look up the exact job you want, and see the objectively researched KSAs. It maps out the exact keywords and skills you need to highlight on your own resume.
That is incredibly practical. I love that. Okay, so we have the blueprint, KSAs. But how do employers test if you actually have them without Human bias creeping in.
This brings us to Kennedy analysis and testing. Companies use various tests to measure those KSAs objectively, right? Personality tests, integrity tests, physical fitness tests, and cognitive ability tests.
Okay.
And typically, an organization will set a cutoff score. If you score below the cutoff, your application goes straight into the rejection pile.
But is a high score always a good thing?
Well, you'd think so.
Take personality, for instance. If I'm hiring for a customer service role, I'd obviously want someone who scores high on agreeableness.
Yeah.
But if their agreeableness score is too high and a customer calls in with a completely wrong perception of a product, that rep might just endlessly agree with them to avoid conflict rather than actually resolving the issue.
What's fascinating here is that you've hit on a major challenge in this field. More is not always better.
Right.
Any test score has to be correlated with verified assessments of what actually predicts good job performance. And this concept of a score being too high applies to intelligence, too.
Which brings us back to my question from the intro. A company would actually reject you for being too smart.
Yes, they absolutely would. Let's look at the real-world case of Robert Jordan. He was a 49-year-old college graduate applying to be a police officer in New London, Connecticut. He took the Wonderlic personnel test, which measures cognitive ability. Jordan scored a 33. That is the equivalent of an IQ of 125, which is well above the national average of 100.
So he's highly capable.
Yeah.
He's exactly who you'd want.
You'd think.
Yeah.
But the New London Police Department rejected him before he even got an interview.
Wow.
Their policy was to reject anyone who scored over a 27, which is an IQ of about 104.
Okay, I need the mechanism here.
Yeah.
Why penalize intelligence?
Well, they believed that anyone scoring higher than a 104 would inevitably get bored with standard police work.
Seriously.
Yeah, they figured he'd get bored and quit shortly after going through all that expensive training. They strictly enforced that cutoff because 104 was the national average for police officers.
That sounds less like a double-edged sword and more like, I don't know, a bouncer at a club who's told to reject anyone wearing a tie because they might ruin the party vibe.
That's a pretty good analogy.
Did he fight it?
He did. He sued the police department for discrimination, claiming his civil rights were violated.
Wow.
But he lost.
Wait, he lost?
Yeah, the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the city did not discriminate against him because they applied that exact same standard universally to everyone.
Wow. Okay, so let's say you pass the Goldilocks test. You know, you aren't too low, you aren't too high. You actually make it to the interview stage.
Right, the interview.
We know human bias lives in the interview room. How do companies try to control for that?
Well, the research is very clear on the mechanism here. Structured interviews are far superior to unstructured ones at predicting job performance.
Okay, structured versus unstructured.
Right. A major 1994 meta-analysis by McDaniel and colleagues proved this. In an unstructured interview, the manager basically wings it.
Just having a chat.
Exactly. The questions aren't standardized, and the scoring is entirely subjective. But in a structured interview, every single candidate is asked the exact same prepared questions, in the exact same order, and scored on a standardized system.
But even with a standardized system, the person holding the clipboard is still human.
Oh, completely.
I mean, we take in so much more than just verbal answers. What about nonverbal cues?
Nonverbal cues are massively influential and often subvert the structured questions entirely. Things like hand gestures, nodding, smiling, and eye contact. They alter the interviewer's perception of your competence subconsciously.
Right. And in section 13.2, there's a study on this that really caught my eye. The Levine and Feldman study from 2002.
Oh, yes, that one is striking.
They ran mock interviews to see how nonverbal behaviors affected likability and competence. Smiling generally helped everyone.
As you'd expect.
But the eye contact data was wild. They found that men who maintain higher levels of eye contact were rated as less likable.
Right.
But women who made greater eye contact were rated as more likable. It completely flipped.
It's such a striking finding because it highlights how deeply ingrained social and gender norms are.
Yeah.
The interviewers are subconsciously filtering the exact same physical behavior through a gendered lens.
So what is the synthesized insight for the listener getting ready for an interview? If the rules change based on your gender or personality, what do you actually do?
The meta skill here isn't just knowing your resume, it's reading the room.
Reading the room.
Right. The research advises strategic self-promotion. If you're highly extroverted, verbal self-promotion works well. But if you're naturally agreeable, lean into nonverbal methods like smiling.
Okay.
But you have to adjust on the fly, because if you're dealing with a highly experienced interviewer, the data shows that overdoing self-promotion actually backfires. You have to thread that needle based on who is sitting across from you.
Okay, so you navigate the bias, you nail the interview, and you get the job. Now what?
Now the real work begins.
Right. We use tests and structured interviews to try and kill bias during the hiring phase. But once you're inside the building, does that bias just creep right back into how you are developed?
Well, this is where we move from acquiring talent to training and mentoring it.
Okay.
Most people just think of orientation, learning the time tracking software or the company history. But formal organizational training goes much deeper, and we know it actually works.
It does.
Yeah, a massive 2003 study by Arthur Bennett, Edens, and Bell proved that organizational training is objectively effective.
But how? I mean, I've sat through some awful corporate training modules
Hmm.
where the only measurement was whether I click next at the right time.
We all have.
What is the actual mechanism that makes training successful?
The mechanism is about measuring the transfer of learning. That 2003 study didn't just ask if employees liked the training.
Right, because liking it doesn't mean it worked.
Exactly. They measured behavioral change. Did the training take an abstract concept, like a new safety protocol, and turn it into a measurable change in how the employee behaved on the floor under pressure?
Oh, I see.
When training is designed to impact behavioral measurements and bottom-line productivity, it works.
Okay, so that's the formal stuff. But I want to talk about informal training, specifically mentoring.
A huge topic in IO psychology.
Everyone says you need a mentor to survive the corporate world. But does having someone take you under their wing actually translate to cold, hard cash and promotions? Or is it just about getting warm, fuzzy feelings of support?
The data strongly supports the cold, hard cash aspect.
Really?
Yeah. An extensive review by Allen and colleagues in 2004 found that mentoring positively affects a protege's compensation and the number of promotions they receive compared to those without mentors.
Wow.
But, and this is a big but, the dynamics here are incredibly complex when we look at demographics.
Right, because senior leadership in most large organizations is still heavily white and male, right?
Precisely.
So women and racial minorities often lack access to mentors of their own demographic.
Yes, that's exactly the issue.
So what happens when a mentor and a mentee don't match? Are they missing out on the benefits?
This is where the textbook reveals a really nuanced dual finding. When you have a same race or same gender pairing, the mentee reports much better psychosocial outcomes.
Okay, so they feel more supported.
Right. They feel a greater sense of emotional support and connection.
That makes total sense. You feel understood on a deeper level without having to explain your lived experience.
Exactly. However, when it comes to actual career advancement-like promotions and higher pay, women and people of color actually experience greater gains when they are mentored by someone of a different gender or race.
Wait, really?
Yes.
So the psychological comfort is higher with a demographic match, but the institutional leverage, like the access to those established networks of power, is higher with a mismatch.
That's it, exactly.
That is a tough tightrope to walk.
It is. It shows that navigating a career isn't just about skill, it's about network access.
Okay, so you have the leverage, you're doing the job, now you're being graded. Does the evaluation process actually measure your work objectively, or is it just another arena for bias?
Performance appraisals are evolving exactly because of that fear of bias.
Yeah.
Traditionally, it was just one boss rating you, which is highly subjective.
Right.
To counter this, many organizations use the 360-degree feedback appraisal.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because in a 360 review, you aren't just rated by your boss. You're rated by your peers, your direct reports, maybe even customers, and you rate yourself.
Right.
But I have to push back here. Isn't asking peers to rate each other just a recipe for toxic office politics?
Oh, completely.
Like, if I'm competing with Bob for a promotion,
Yeah.
I am subtly going to tank Bob's rating rate.
Your instinct is spot on. The 2002 Atkins and Woods study cited in the text found exactly that. Self and peer ratings are notoriously unreliable as objective assessments of actual performance.
I knew it.
Supervisors even tend to underrate employees who give themselves modest self-evaluations.
Okay, so if the data is basically gamified and completely unreliable, why on earth do companies still use 360-degree reviews?
Because the goal isn't mathematical perfection. The discrepancies are the point.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, when you rate yourself a 10 on communication, but your peers rate you a 4, that friction forces a highly specific conversation with your supervisor.
Oh, I see.
It breaks the illusion that everyone sees your work the same way, and that friction sparks genuine learning.
I love that. The friction is the point. But what happens when the friction isn't about different perspectives on your work, but fundamental bias about who you are?
Ah, that is the dark side of IO psychology.
Right.
Bias is often automatic and subconscious. For example, researchers Egerstrom and Ruth sent out identical resumes with applicant photos.
Okay.
They found that hiring managers who scored high on tests for implicit negative associations with overweight people systematically favored the non-obese candidates and rejected the obese candidates.
Even though the KSAs were completely identical.
Exactly. It's an automatic cognitive link. The textbook also explores the beauty premium, where physical attractiveness objectively benefits you in hiring and pay, though the strength of that premium has decreased slightly since the 1970s.
Which is exactly why we need legal shields. We have the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the ADA, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, and the 2020 Supreme Court ruling protecting LGBTQ individuals.
Yes.
You cannot legally base decisions on race, religion, age, pregnancy, or disability.
Right. The law tries to force employers to stick to the KSAs.
But let's talk about the gender pay gap. The Equal Pay Act exists,
It does.
but the textbook cites that Corbett and Hill study from 2012 showing women earn about 82 cents for every dollar a man earns right out of college.
Right.
Now, I know they tried to adjust for career choices, like if a woman chooses a major with lower earning potential. But even after those adjustments, there was still an unexplained 7 cents on the dollar gap that could only be attributed to straight-up gender discrimination.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's actually worse than that 7 cents.
Really?
Yeah, that study relied on something called the human capital model.
Okay, I need a definition there. What is the human capital model?
The human capital model mathematically assumes that workers are paid based on the capital they bring to the market, their education, their years of experience, their specific skills. So economists use this model to subtract those variables, trying to find the pure discrimination left over. They say, well, she chose to be a social worker and he chose to be a software engineer, so we have to account for that choice in the math.
Well, I mean, that makes logical sense, doesn't it?
Researcher Hilary Lips argues it doesn't.
Why not?
She points out that those educational and career choices are often severely constrained by societal gender discrimination in the first place.
Oh.
If society subtly pushes women away from STEM fields and into lower-paying caregiving roles, calling it a free choice ignores the underlying structural bias.
Wow, so the model is flawed.
Right. By subtracting those factors in the human capital model, you are artificially shrinking the true systemic size of the pay gap.
The system itself is skewed before the choice is even made.
Yeah.
And, that idea of structural bias disguised as an objective requirement reminds me of that famous Supreme Court case mentioned in Section 13.2, Griggs v. Duke Power Co.
Yes, that is a foundational case.
Yeah.
Duke Power Company required a high school diploma for employees to transfer into higher-paying departments. In the 1950s and 60s South, that requirement disproportionately filtered out African-American applicants.
But the company argued they just wanted educated workers, right? Like, it wasn't about race, just education.
They did. But the Supreme Court ruled that disparate impact is illegal.
Disparate impact.
Yes. If an educational requirement negatively impacts one race over another, Andy, the company cannot prove that the degree is directly related to actual job performance. Like a diploma not being strictly necessary for the manual labor in those departments, it's illegal. You cannot put arbitrary barriers in a job description.
Okay, this brings me to my million-dollar aha question.
Let's hear it.
If discrimination based on these categories is federally illegal, and you can't even have arbitrary educational barriers, how do airlines legally mandate retirement ages for pilots? Or even more extremely, how does a place like Hooters legally hire only female wait staff?
It sounds illegal, right?
Yeah. Do they just pay fines to the EEOC as a cost of doing business?
No, they don't pay fines for it because they use the ultimate legal loophole in employment law bona fide occupational qualifications, or BFOQs.
VFOQs. Yeah.
These are the rare, highly specific exceptions where denying someone a job based on their sex, religion, or age is actually perfectly legal.
So how does a company legally prove they need a BFOQ?
Yeah.
I'm guessing they just have to show that customers strongly prefer it, like people prefer female wait staff.
No, customer preference absolutely does not count. The courts use a three-part test for sex-related BFOQs, and the most important hurdle is the essence of the business test.
Essence of the business.
Right. The court asks, would hiring the other gender fundamentally undermine the core operation of the business? Pan American World Airways actually tested this. They tried to argue they could only hire female flight attendants.
Because they're mostly male business travelers preferred it.
Exactly. But the court struck it down. They ruled that the essence of an airline is safely transporting passengers from point A to point B.
Right.
Hiring male flight attendants does not undermine that essence.
That makes perfect sense. But wait, so how does Hooters survive that exact same test?
Well, Hooters has built their entire legal defense around redefining their essence.
What do you mean?
They argue that they are not just selling wings and beer. They argue their fundamental business essence is providing sexualized entertainment.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, they claim, hiring men as waitstaff would fundamentally destroy the essence of what they are selling.
That is wild legal gymnastics. Have they ever been forced to prove that in front of a judge?
Well, men have absolutely filed discrimination charges against them over the years, but Hooters is highly strategic.
They settle.
Exactly. They consistently settle these lawsuits out of court, paying off the plaintiffs. By settling, they avoid a definitive Supreme Court ruling that could potentially destroy their entire business model. They rely on the BFOQ defense without ever letting it be fully tested at the highest level.
That is fascinating. So, student to lecturer, looking back at what we've covered today, from how a job description is objectively built using those KSAs, to the IQ bouncer at the door, the complex gender dynamics of just a simple smile, and the legal gymnastics of BFOQs. It is clear that understanding IO psychology is vital.
It really is the hidden code of the workplace.
Yeah, the workplace isn't a neat math equation. It's a constant tug of war between objective data and subjective human bias.
It absolutely is. But, this raises an important question for you, the listener, to ponder as we close. One that wasn't in the textbook but feels inevitable based on everything we've discussed today.
I'm intrigued.
If our job descriptions are based on our KSAs, our specific human knowledge, skills, and abilities, and we are now entering an era where artificial intelligence can instantly replicate so many of those tasks, how will IO psychologists redefine a human job description in the next decade?
Wow.
When AI can do the task-oriented work flawlessly, what will the future essence of the business actually be?
That is a terrifying and thrilling question to leave on. Thank you for taking on the lecturer role today, and thank you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the system and keep learning. We'll catch you next time.